Welcome to this explainer. Today we're unpacking a really frustrating mystery. Why is it that some perfectly engineered projects wildly succeed while others just completely stall out? To figure this out, we're going to start with a real-world scenario that perfectly captures this whole dynamic. Let's call it the SMO paradox.
Okay, picture this. A highly capable engineer is brought in to work with the State Workforce Modernization Office. They're tasked with building an AI assistant for the state's legacy COBOL unemployment system, a system so clunky it forces 280 caseworkers to flip through 4 different screens just to compute basic eligibility. So the engineer builds this amazing AI tool. 8 weeks in, they run a demo for the deputy commissioner, and man, it is a massive success. The model hits a staggering 84% accuracy rate in correctly populating fields during testing, meaning only 16% needs manual tweaking. It looks like an absolute total victory.
But fast forward 12 weeks after that amazing demo, what do we see? A staggering failure. Fewer than 6% of those 280 caseworkers had actually used the tool on a real claim. I mean, think about that. Why did an 84% accurate model see less than a 6% adoption rate?
Well, turns out the training team was never given the resources to teach the staff. The 2 field office supervisors who were supposed to champion the whole rollout, they got rotated to completely different assignments. Oh, and the IT manager casually noted that the integration needed a security review, which literally nobody had ever scheduled. Of course, the engineer blamed the state organization, saying they just weren't ready. But honestly, that forces us to ask the million-dollar question, whose project was it anyway? The hard truth, it was the engineer's project during the demo, and absolutely nobody's project after that.
All right, let's get into part 1, the 4 ownership rungs.
So imagine this sort of ownership ladder made up of 4 distinct operating modes. You essentially climb this ladder as you expand the boundary of what you consider to be your responsibility on any given project. And just to be clear, this isn't some personality test, right? It's really just a measure of the default size of the box you draw around the words "your job." Think about your own day-to-day as we break down each of these rungs. Down at the very bottom on rung 1, we've got the spectator. The spectator essentially treats their role like a contracted specialist who just consumes a brief and spits out a deliverable. If a crucial element is missing, like say an owner for the day 2 rollout, their default response is just, well, I flagged it, nobody got back to me. They basically just report the problem and then sit around, helplessly waiting to be told what to do next.
Moving up to rung 2, we find the doer. Now, this is someone who gets their assigned tasks done competently and on time. They're going to work incredibly hard for sure, but they work with their head down and they stop at the exact literal boundary of their brief. To them, that missing day 2 owner is definitely not their problem. Their default response is going to be, hey, I built what I was scoped to build. The owner question? That's for the program manager.
Then there's rung 3, the delivery mode owner. This is actually where a lot of really solid mid-level professionals sit. They drive their specific artifact to ship, they identify blockers, they escalate them well, but they mentally check out the exact second the demo is over. If the rollout starts stalling, their matter-of-fact response is, look, I asked twice and got vague answers. I closed out my scope of work and rotated. So they successfully ship the artifact, but definitely not the outcome.
And finally, at the very top, the founder-like owner. This person drives the actual outcome all the way to adopted use. They treat the engagement success as their own personal reputation. Most importantly, they never ever say, that's not my job. When they hit a missing day 2 owner, they don't just flag it. They say, I drafted a candidate owner and a 30-60-90 plan, and I put them on the deputy commissioner's calendar for Friday. See the difference? They proactively solve the organizational bottlenecks.
Which brings us to part 2, the bias to ship.
You know, if you look across hundreds of project postmortems, one single behavior constantly shows up on the founder-like side of the equation. They ship the next move without being asked. And a crucial point for you here is that shipping, in this context, doesn't just mean merging code or finishing a Jira ticket. It means pushing the real-world outcome forward, even when that literally requires stepping outside your formal swim lane. It's about noticing a bottleneck that nobody assigned to you and just fixing it.
And look, this philosophy isn't just some abstract theory. It's directly anchored in canonical leadership frameworks. Take Amazon's famous leadership principles. They explicitly state that leaders never say, that's not my job. Jocko Willink's extreme ownership dictates that the leader carries the burden so others can actually function. And Paul Graham's classic essay on founder mode, it emphasizes remaining heavily involved in the gritty operations rather than just retreating to delegation. These frameworks prove that stepping up to own the unowned pieces is a universally recognized driver of success.
Moving right along to Part 3, 1FD's Tuesday.
Let's actually track one engineer's literal Tuesday from that state government project we talked about and watch them fluctuate across the rungs. Okay, 8:40 a.m. They notice a supervisor rotated out and spend 20 minutes booking a meeting with a replacement. That is a clear rung 4 move outside their scope. At 10:15, they merge a clean code update, solid rung 3 delivery task. 11:30, they notice an unassigned security review and just draft a stance document themselves. Boom, another proactive rung 4 move. But then, at 1 p.m., they sit silently in a steering committee instead of raising a politically uncomfortable training gap. Yikes, dropping right down to a rung 2 doer. Thankfully, though, at 3:20 p.m., they bounce back by sending a risk note directly to the deputy commissioner to solve the issue.
This is the real kicker here, and it brilliantly illustrates a vital truth. Acting like a founder isn't about just working harder or pulling all-nighters. I mean, look at that timeline. None of those rung 4 moves cost more than 30 minutes of time. Founder-like ownership is really about noticing the unowned bottleneck and taking high-leverage 30-minute actions to unblock the entire project.
All right, let's jump to Part 4, the 5-dimension mirror. When you're evaluating your own work, you absolutely cannot rely on abstract, fuzzy feelings. You need hard evidence. For instance, did you actually name a bottleneck outside your swim lane? Rung 4 requires a physical artifact, like a Slack DM or an email, proposing a move. A rung 3 person just mentions it in a meeting with no record. And check out the ship, fix, or meeting dimension. Did you ship a fix, or did you merely ship a meeting? A founder-like owner fixes the bottleneck themselves in under 30 minutes, whereas a delivery mode owner just creates an action item for someone else. By looking at these specific dimensions, you can clearly see if you're truly owning the outcome, or just forwarding the problem down the line.
Finally, Part 5, making operating commitments. Before you go making commitments to corrector defaults, we definitely have to clear up some major misconceptions. First off, do not confuse ownership with pulling insane 60-hour work weeks. That is usually just a symptom of rung 2 doer behavior, keeping your head down and grinding blindly on the assigned brief. True ownership is about stepping back, noticing the unassigned bottleneck outside your scope, and shipping the next move. If your only case for ownership is the sheer number of hours you logged, well, you haven't really earned that top rung yet.
Second thing, when you're auditing your own performance, avoid what I call confessional writing. You know what I mean? The 600-word journal entry that basically just says, should have done more, I'll really try to be better next time. That produces literally zero behavior change. Instead, you've got to write actionable commitments. These need to be highly specific behaviors with a clear trigger, like, when I notice a rollout owner is unnamed, I will draft a plan. And they absolutely must be verifiable within a single week. As we close out this explainer, I really want to leave you with a tough, challenging reflection. Think about your current projects right now. When was the last time you said, that's not my job, either explicitly out loud or implicitly, just through your silence in a meeting? When did that silence stall a project? And honestly, what next move are you going to ship tomorrow to fix it?